War on Iran has officially begun. US President Donald Trump just bombed Iran on behalf of Israel. Make America great again actually means make the Middle East greater Israel. The President of the United States is captured by Israel, compromised by an Israeli compromat building project by Jeffrey Epstein. What exactly does Israel have on the US President Donald Trump? Are you really willing to die for the pedophile president captured by Epstein's Israel? If you think that Iraq was a tough war for US soldiers to handle, coming home in coffins draped in US flags, then Iran is a whole different kettle of fish. It is 3 times the size of Iraq and has a military which has been preparing for this moment for 5 decades. This war will not benefit the US in any way, shape, or form. Not only will it lead to greater authoritarianism at home, but it will lead to the US throwing everything it can into not only resources directed towards the military, but humans directed towards the US military. US veterans have a far higher rate of suicide than other members of the society. More US soldiers were killed by suicide in Vietnam than killed by the war itself. This war is in no one's interest but a wafer-thin section of the billionaire tax haven Epstein class. The idea being bandied about by client journalists is that somehow Iran would target Europe with a nuclear weapon. Iran has shown no indication of anything of the sort. However, what we do know is that Israel has been developing nuclear weapons for a very long time. US President John F. Kennedy said that the inspection of Israeli nuclear facilities in Dimona was a necessity. That didn't happen, and JFK was killed the very same year he suggested the idea. However, what does exist within military doctrine for the Israelis is something called the Samson option. It is the use of nuclear weapons against any state, anywhere, at any point. It seems that recently Israel may have carried out new nuclear tests. If anybody is crazy enough to drop nuclear weapons, it would be Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, it was key Israel lobbyist Sheldon Adelson who argued for the dropping of nuclear weapons on Iran.
What do you mean support negotiate? What are we going to negotiate about? What I would say is, listen, you pick up your cell phone and you call somewhere in Nebraska and you say, okay, let it go. So there's an atomic weapon goes over ballistic missiles in the middle of the desert that doesn't hurt a soul. Maybe a couple of rattlesnakes and scorpions or whatever. And then you say, see, the next one is in the middle of Tehran.
Who was it that funded Donald Trump in his latest presidential election campaign? None other than Miriam Adelson, the former Israeli soldier and widow of Sheldon Adelson.
Miriam, stand up, please. She really is. I mean, she loves this country. So I'm going to get her in trouble with this, but I actually asked her once. I said, so Miriam, I know you love Israel. What do you love more, the United States or Israel? She refused to answer. That might mean Israel, I must say. Miriam gave my campaign indirectly, $250 million. She was number one. But her husband, Sheldon, was an amazing guy, and he'd come up to the office, and there was nobody more aggressive than Sheldon. I think I spent more time with him and you. He'd call and say, can I come over, please? I say, Sheldon, I'm president of the United States. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's like, maybe tomorrow. How about tomorrow? No, please, just for a little while. He'd always say 10 minutes. It turned out to be about an hour and a half. And what he did is he fought for Israel. That's all he really fought for. He just wanted to take care of Israel.
As Trump's ambassador to Israel stated recently in an interview with Tucker Carlson, the United States today could not care less if Israel takes the entire region.
Does Israel have the right to that land?
It would be fine if they took it all.
Donald Trump is completely at ease with the idea that the Middle East as a region, Western Asia, is in fact an Israeli sphere of influence. So therefore, countries like Iran, Syria, Iraq, and others are simply part of Israel's backyard to this US president. And you'd really have to be stupid if you'd believe that Israel, a country which has bombed almost as many states as there is days in a week across the last year, has anything but sinister intentions for Iran. After 2 years of genocide on the relatively defenseless population of Gaza, after the bombing of Syria, of Yemen, of Iraq, off the coast of Malta, of Qatar, of anywhere Israel wants to bomb, you now see the jewel in the crown, the one state that has materially backed the Palestinian right to armed resistance under UN Resolution 3246, Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, several decades back, employed several CIA figures to write up for him a prognosis of what could happen in the region. Operation Clean Break. That meant splitting up large states in the region into mini statelets in order to decentralize military power from any of those places. And when you look at Iran, the fault lines that the Israelis and US government are looking at are not about building a strong state with any form of democratic protection. It is about exporting the kind of model that you're seeing working in Syria now, the splitting up of the state and the weakening of any form of central power, so that that state never again will be in a position to threaten Zionist expansion militarily. Be clear, the plan is in no way for there to be prosperity in this region. It is the kind of creative chaos mapped out by Peter Thiel and Epstein in emails, is the mentality of the billionaire tax haven Epstein class. Creative chaos for Western Asia. Trump may criticize the neocons.
This great transformation has not come from Western intervention or neocons. The so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves.
But the people that have been working for this war all of these years have been key figures in the neocon war on Iraq. United against a nuclear Iran even has leadership of those that served under Bush's administration and one of George Bush's own brothers in the board. That is who is pushing Trump towards this war. When you look at the Board of Peace, which has now been launched to control and watch over the potential disarmament of the Palestinian resistance in Gaza and the mass displacement of the Palestinians, essentially achieving what Israel failed to do with 2 years of genocide, you see that Donald Trump, his true face, is in clear alignment with Tony Blair and those that launched the war in Iraq. The same people that brought you the lies about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq are the same people bringing you the same lies about Iran. And Netanyahu has been doing so for decades and decades.
If Iran acquires a nuclear bomb, it could use any one of these shadowy groups to threaten the United States, threaten the West.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year. It could be within a few months, less than a year.
Just in case you are unclear about the extent that Israel is willing to go to in Iran internally, the Farsi channel of Israel's external intelligence agency, Mossad, published a statement. The time has come. We are with you, not only from afar and not just in words. We are with you in the field as well. The former head of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, stated, "Happy New Year to every Iranian in the streets, also to every Mossad agent walking beside them." Former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated that Israel should steer the movement in the streets with an invisible hand. You either support international law or you support the law of the jungle. And what you have on the side of Israel is the law of permanent genocide. The US government, and the Israelis particularly, are hoping to install the pretender to the throne, the son of the Shah of Iran. But who is advising him? None other than Parviz Sabeti, the torturer who, under the Shah before, headed up the third directorate of the SAVAK.
The CIA helped the Shah set up SAVAK, the secret police force that has tortured so many thousands of them. A classified Senate Foreign Relations Committee report confirms the CIA's role in forming SAVAK. It says the CIA provided the Shah money as well as training for that purpose. Of course, the brutality came later.
Parviz Sabeti tortured and killed many and is subject to a $225 million lawsuit for these human rights violations in the United States. The idea, of course, that the United States does this with the best interest of Iranian people at heart belongs clearly in the colonial encyclopedia of crimes, along with the democratic wishes of the Iraqis, of the Afghans, of the Vietnamese, and of any other victim that the United States chooses at that time. In fact, US and EU sanctions are believed to have killed 38 million people across the global south since 1970. 25% of humanity live within political systems which are subject to US sanctions. And today you have no more sanctioned state than Iran. Iran's GDP per capita dropped from over $8,000 in 2012 to just over $4,000 in 2026. You don't have to support the Iranian government to oppose the overthrowing of it by a foreign power and the plunging of an ancient civilization into chaos. If any state in the world looks at the trajectory of those that relinquish their weapons programs to gain proximity to the West, they would look at Libya, see Tony Blair's handshake in the desert, and then what happened. They would also look at North Korea and see Donald Trump's meeting with the leader there. The lesson here is if you cease your weapons development to please the West, you will be overthrown. If you keep your weapons, you have some degree of safety. After the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, Turkey began building two things: underground bomb shelters and ballistic missiles. Because, as Naftali Bennett and Netanyahu alluded to, Turkey is next on the menu. This war will alienate US allies in the region because they are first in the line of fire. And of course, as Iran has demonstrated, it can respond from 1,000 miles away with surface-to-air ballistic missiles that will strike all US bases in the region. The Strait of Hormuz will be closed. US oil platforms will be destroyed. Do you think the economy of the United States can survive a war with Iran? This is why war in Iran will be far harder than they thought it would. You have to remember that Iran has deep connections to both China and Russia. There is Russian military present in Iran, and they have the strategic, comprehensive partnership with China, with a plan of tens of billions being directly invested into the Iranian economy by China across the coming decade. Will China and Russia allow Iran to fall? That is the question here. It is easily foreseeable that this war could spiral out of the control of Western powers and that we could be on the precipice of World War III. And so, let me reiterate and ask you again, are you really willing to die for the pedophile president captured by Epstein's Israel? Ultimately, powerful forces are at perpetual war. And in order for that to happen, there has to be perpetual war against your critical thinking.